Recording in progress.
Welcome. Good evening. Tuesday, August 8th, a very special meeting that will commence at this time. And when this concludes in under 2 hours, we will go to our regular meeting. So at this time, we will call for roll call, please.
Director Coverdale,
Yes, I'm here.
Director Feldman,
Here.
Director Reynolds,
Here.
Vice President Michelson,
Here.
President Mueller.
Here, we are all present and pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 3 will be public comments. Comments would be on that will be on the agenda, that maximum of 3 minutes. And at this time, do we have any public comment? It looks like we do not at this time, so we'll move on to item 4. Board workshop with our visitors. The firm is here now. We'd like to introduce your professional staff with us, please.
All right. Well, you know me, Cindy with Waterworks Engineers. Nice to see everyone here in person today. This is Andy, our hydrogeologist. He's going to start first, and I also have Lainey in my office that's going to help us. So Andy likes to move around the room. So he's gonna get up all these.
I'm too antsy. I can't sit still.
So the first part is he's gonna like have a basic primer on ground hydrogeology.
Yeah.
Term. So, and then the second part is we have our lovely posters. You can start thinking of ideas where we're gonna if you just tell me, have ideas on, we want to include what you guys have already thought about over the years in our study. We've heard lots of ideas, so we're here to collect them. But the first part is he's gonna give us a little background.
Thank you. Well, as you well know, this board will not hold back on the last lifetime of looking at.
I got post-it notes. We can like, have
recycled
some
water.
fun after we're here. So.
That's right.
But first, we'll have a little.
Yeah, go ahead. Andrew.
So wonderful to be here. My name is Andy Zadon. I've been working in groundwater since 1987. I'm a California professional geologist, California certified hydrogeologist, California certified engineering geologist. And then I do work in Utah and Arizona, and I'm licensed there as well. I do a lot of work all over the state, from Imperial County up to Mendocino County and often to Plumas and et cetera. So see a lot, but I do also do a lot of work in the Death Valley area. So when you talk about hydrologic extremes, working here and then working in the Death Valley, it's really encompassing that. Our office is based in Oakland. We have offices other places in California, but I'm out of our Oakland office. Our staff is very excited to be working on this project. From day one, once we got approval to move, there was pretty much the entire office wanted to work on parts of this at least. So there's a lot of work going on. We're trying to work on an expedited schedule so that we can get our information over to Waterworks as quickly as possible so that they can take what we come up with and move. So I'll be talking about a little bit about our schedule on this.
I guess with your background, sir, you've outgrown the willow water witching for water now, right?
We'll talk a little bit about that.
In our days down the coast, that's what the old timers would look at.
Yeah, right.
Where to drill your well. You just get a good old willow branch and go out and witch for it, I think.
Yeah.
The oil wells they were drilling in those days, I'm giving you a quick history. They had doodle buggers. They would sit and monitor where the oil was, looking at this little bob going back and forth, and they were called doodle buggers. I don't know if you've ever heard that one.
No, I haven't. That's a one.
Well, don't ask me any other recent questions, but I could tell you what when the 50s was like was a kid. Hang out with the oil well guys. All right, go ahead, sir. Sorry to interrupt.
Can we go to the next slide?
Is there any slides on this thing?
I don't think so yet. Lisa.
What?
This one's blacked out.
Yeah,
No slides on.
no, we will, just a second.
It's keeping you in the dark, that's all.
Keep me in the dark this one.
Cool.
Where I always am.
Wait, that's my house.
So,
That's right.
so what I'm gonna chat about a little bit of is of the area we're looking at, because we're taking kind of a wide.
I sure hope it's not there.
We're taking a widespread look at things. That's just like that picture. I was out here a few weeks ago, so.
That's his house.
My house, yeah, my house. That's where we're putting the plant. Work.
He'll have to abstain from this vote.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about basins versus watershed, which in California, unlike other states, it's a little different. I'm going to talk a little bit about the water cycle. This is the point of what I'm talking to you about tonight is to sort of bring everybody up to speed on the same level on groundwater concepts, hydrogeology concepts. It's non-project specific, so that when we do present about the project, everybody's sort of on the same level playing field of understanding what we're talking about. And if we throw out terms, there's just a better awareness, and it's clearer as we present things at the back end. And then I'm going to go a little bit about groundwater and some issues with groundwater and water budgets and wells and groundwater mounding versus cones of depression and drawdown, things like that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of what we're doing and when we're going to be doing it by, so we're schedule wise. Next slide. So we're doing this for recycled water. There's lots of potential uses. There's more beyond this list I provide. I provide this picture here to show you that there is actually the potential for direct potable reuse from our astronauts in space. But yeah, there are lots of uses even beyond this that these waters can be used for. Next. So basins versus watershed. Very different things in California. In California, unlike other states, groundwater basins are the alluvial, unconsolidated portion, essentially the bathtub of sediments in the basin. And the basin boundaries are drawn at the essentially, usually the mountain interfaces with the basins. So the watersheds are left out of what is within the basin boundary. So, and actually in California, there's about half the state that is not formally considered within the boundaries of a groundwater basin, which is a very strange thing. In other states, it's the watershed to the basin. It's all inclusive. So when we talk about the basins here, it's important to keep in mind of what we're talking about. And when we use the term basin, we're really going to be talking about the whole watershed, which is what we're looking at. The reason also, although some of these things that have been talked about for recycled water and all of that are sort of location specific, when you make changes in one location with water, it can have an effect of changing something somewhere else. And one of the things I found in my experience is you can't make necessarily a project area too large, but you can certainly make it too small. And so it's important to make sure we're just looking at things. So we're really kind of looking at it as a basin-wide picture as far as the hydrogeology and how we're going to be looking at that. Next. So the water cycle, where is this water all coming from? So most of the precipitation on the planet comes from evaporation of ocean water. So water evaporates off the ocean, and please be patient. A lot of, I don't know what the backgrounds of folks are, but I'm going through some very basic concepts. So this may be old hat, to others not. Anyway, water moves, the moisture moves in off the ocean. You get rainfall in the mountains. Part of that rainfall goes as runoff. Part of that goes off as recharge. The percentage of that will vary a lot what the percentage of what goes as recharge versus runoff will vary on the geology and a lot of different conditions, the intensity of the rainfall, things like that. In places like this, there's really kind of a common percentage where you say, well, 10% of the rainfall goes as recharge and 90% goes off, and maybe 20-80. I'm working in an area in the Eastern Sierra in volcanic terrain where it's completely flip-flop, and 80% goes to recharge and about 20% runs off. And it's all based on the surface soils that are there. They're just very permeable. That water moves down through the system, and where it either discharges through springs or it evaporates from lakes where it gets water from surface water. Plants will use up where there's shallow groundwater. They'll transpire the water. People will pump it out of the ground, etc. Or there will be additional recharge areas. For instance, agricultural use will have a certain percentage of the water that goes back to groundwater. All those things are the parts that make up what we call a groundwater budget. We'll talk a little bit about that. Next. So how does groundwater appear in the table? And this gets to the water witching thing. So instead of sort of the concept of underground rivers that you'll hear talked about, you got to think of groundwater in the ground more of being like in a sponge. It's pretty much, if you drill anywhere, you're going to hit water. It's just how much and of what quality and at what depth. So there is water everywhere. It's just relative to each other where our better producing areas. There's some things that there's one thing here where, depending on who you talk to, this is a USGS slide. What is groundwater? Is it only the water that is below the water table, or is it anything below ground surface? That gets to be this is the sticky question in here. And that's where you'll find a lot of litigation related to, for instance, in springs. Is that spring, can you do a water right on the spring? Is it groundwater discharging or is it surface water? And that's where things get sticky. So it's not as sure as what they're saying here is not groundwater. But groundwater fills up these porous spaces within the sediments. Interestingly enough, clays are more porous than sands. You don't think about that. There's more water stored in clays than there are in sands. It's just that what's in the clay is not capturable. It's tight, it's stuck in there, it's absorbed to the particles, but it can hold a lot of water. So anyway, as far as these, the more open the pore spaces and more interconnected, the more permeable that soil will be, and the better yielding that the aquifer will be. The other issue when I'm talking about permeability is the concept of horizontal versus vertical permeability. So permeability is sort of like in electronics, it would be sort of like your resistance in a circuit. It's how much that it's sort of the resistance of the aquifer to allow water to flow through. It's usually presented in terms of a rate like feet per day or centimeters per second. I like to use feet per day because it's something you can visualize. If a sand has a hydraulic conductivity, which is the term that's used, of 5 feet per day, you can say, okay, I can visualize that. 5 feet in a day, that's how fast this is moving. I can see that. Centimeters per second is a little hard to get your head around. But for a project like this, understanding vertical permeability, which is how easily does water move downward versus laterally, is really important as far as if you're thinking about terms of percolating water. I'll show a slide related to that next. And then different types of aquifers. So you have unconfined aquifers, and you have confined aquifers, and they're usually separated from each other by confining units, which are usually low permeability sediments like clays or silts, or even some interbedded volcanics, depending on where you're at. And changes to, as a result of either water pumping or injection will be much slower in unconfined aquifers. You'll see those changes slower than you will in confined aquifers. And why is that? Well, it's because in unconfined aquifers, drainage is gravity driven. So it's just going to kind of drain as it can. Whereas in a confined aquifer, it's pressurized. So it's like almost like a piston pushing that water in. So if you start pumping here, you're going to see that response really quick because it's a pressure response through the aquifer. Doesn't have to do with how fast water molecules are moving through the aquifer. It's just a pressure change. So that will also be kind of important when it comes to how we look at mounding and how fast that would take if we're going to do some kind of percolation of recycled water or other uses versus injecting it, et cetera. Next. So this is an example of what you can see when you have different rock units that have different permeabilities. So this is below the golf course at the Ritz-Carlton. These are the bluffs below there. This is one formation up here. These are like terrace deposits, and then this is the Purisima down here. And so you get water from the sprinkling that seeps down because these sediments have a pretty high vertical permeability, so the water moves down. It reaches that contact. This aquifer has much less so. It's probably more horizontally driven. And so the water reaches here, has nowhere to go, and seeps out, and it causes the spring line along the bluff. And so that's an example of how that differential flow between these units can happen and what it presents. Next. So groundwater budget, groundwater system. There's an equation in groundwater called the groundwater equation, well named, and that is inflow minus outflow equals change in storage. If you have a glass of water sitting under a tap, and that tap is flowing into that glass of water and then it's overflowing, the rate of overflow is equal to the rate of what's coming out of the tap. And what's in the glass is your storage. So if you stick a straw in and you start sucking water out, that what's coming out overflowing is going to be whatever you're sucking out of the straw. It's going to be reduced by that amount. So in each of these, in a water budget, in an aquifer system, when you apply a new stress to it, whether putting water in or taking it out, everything else is going to adjust because the system will want to reach a new equilibrium point. And so you'll hear things like, well, we're taking water from storage. Storage is a transit thing. It's just a thing over time that's happening as the system is reaching a new equilibrium point. Next slide. So as an example, let's say you've got a basin and there's no wells in it and it's as stable as it could be. It's been the same for 1,000 years. Water level's been flat, same one. You put a well in and you start pumping water. What happens? Well, the initial response in the well is you're going to lower the water level in the well as you're pumping it. And that then water is going to start draining to the well to allow flow to it. And that's where you get this that we call a cone of depression. The exact opposite can happen where there's recharge where you'll actually get mounding. That cone of depression will continue to grow until the inflow towards the wells equals the outflow coming out of the well. And once this, the only way this will stabilize is if the other parts of the water budget adjust to allow it to happen. So for instance, if this is your water table, and let's pretend for the moment that these trees are dependent on the water table to stay alive. So they transpire water. So you've got outflows of the trees, the evapotranspiration from the trees, and you've got underflow heading out of here to the right. If you start pumping here, what's ultimately going to happen when this stabilizes is there's going to be either a reduction in what the plants can use, and it'll become stressed, or it's just going to be taken out of what's leaving the basin. But if you have a situation where that water level is never stabilizing, it means you're taking out more than just is coming into the system. And that can be a problem. Next. This is an example of a problem. This is a site in Oregon, and this is just a point to hammer home that long-term groundwater declines indicate that outflows have been exceeding recharge for a long time. I see this a lot. You see this a lot in the desert where I work, where the water, if you grab a water sample from a lot of the basins I work at in the California desert, you'll find that water fell as rainfall during the ice ages in the Pleistocene. It's 15,000-year-old water when mastodons were walking around here. There's not a lot of flow through, and there's not a lot of recharge happening. And so it doesn't take much stress to create these kinds of trends. Next. This is just another example of here. This is an injection thing. Again, this is what sort of mounding looks like. As part of what we're doing for this kind of phase of the project, we're going to be using a USGS analytical model for evaluating like a first cut of what that mounding would look like if you're trying to do recharge to the shallow aquifers in the basin. There's not a lot of storage room there for water. So we want to take a look at what that looks like and what are the implications of that. Next. One of the important, and then doing the analysis now. So we're anticipating getting a draft to Waterworks by the end of August, maybe into the middle of September. But with the idea of getting a final report to them by the end of September. And then once they do their work, we would be part of the joint presentation of the results of both, the hydraulic issues, the permitting issues, and then what Waterworks provides.
Very nice. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, comments, any directors? I think interesting comment for me personally, because I've lived with the blue clay and sand on our wells and stuff. What would be the preference if we recharge? Would we want to have more blue clay and less sand? Because when the well drillers drilling us a well, they always want the sand, right? As a rule.
Well, yeah. So the clays aren't going to take the water, so they're going to be have very low permeability.
Right.
So you're going to.
What about if you needed it to kind of, people are recharging for cleanliness now?
So we wouldn't put dirty water down in.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you put dirty, it's kind of like putting your sewage out the back door, trying to drink your drinking water out the front door. It's not a good program. So the water we put in would be clean water.
Okay.
So we can't. And unfortunately, one of the things that we're going to need to worry about is one of the bigger groundwater banking programs is semi-tropic. And their biggest problem right now is the water they're storing downstairs is coming out worse quality because of natural arsenic. Arsenic's pretty easy to treat, but it adds to the cost. And one of the things that obviously we'll want to look at is the driller's logs for the wells in the basin and see what potential contaminants we would worry about degrading our water quality. And that's done by looking at the groundwater logs, the well logs, and see what minerals are downstairs.
Very good response. Yeah, any other questions of Andy at the moment?
Yeah, there's a great example of reuse. Orange County Water District has sort of a classic example. Almost every water resource conference that happens in Southern California gets a tour of the Orange County Water District facilities down there. They were one of the earliest ones to actually use tertiary treated water and recharge the aquifer systems with it. And actually use it for groundwater recharge in the lower Santa Ana River channel as well. So, yeah.
I have a question for you. There's often discussions just because of the groups, the various groups that are using water in our area. And there's always been a discussion of wouldn't it be nice to have sort of a one read for our entire basin or our entire local geological water reservoir.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're going to be evaluating at that kind of a level.
Yeah, I mean,
So realistically, my question is, do you see this as valuable for other water users in our region, in our basin?
oh,
as well?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the other issues too, and I should have pointed out when I had that picture of the bluff up there, and this gets to when you're percolating. Doing much for that deeper aquifer that's being stressed. So those are also kinds of some of the things that we're looking at that.
But if you were looking sort of geographically at our area of the coast, the Devil's Slide is obviously a northern kind of boundary, or would seem like it is. And so how far south are you going in your evaluation?
We're essentially looking all the way down to like San Gregorio.
Yeah, great, cool. Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping, but
Yeah.
And because I've never really seen a map of your interest.
Yeah.
And for me, it would be really useful at some point. It'd be nice to see something like that graphically,
Yeah,
because there have been a lot of discussions in the past like that, and I think it's useful. Then we are providing information for, long term, looking at the conditions.
yeah, like I said, it's much better to look at the big picture, and there's nothing worse than constraining yourself too much and then finding out. Great example. There's a spring system north of Bishop, California called Fish Slough that's been declining for years. We did a forensic study, a geochemical study to figure out where that water is coming from. What are the sources? Turns out there's multiple sources. But there have been studies for 30 years trying to figure that out. They were all inconclusive. And there was a lot of money spent on lab work and a lot of money spent on scientists looking at it. And we kind of actually got funding from the Bureau of Land Management to figure it out. And we looked at a big picture. We really expanded the area, and it was good we did, because we found out the reason why the results were confounding was some of the sources that were feeding into that are many, many, many miles away, tens of miles away, and we're way outside the study areas of the previous study. So by constraining it, there was a lot of money wasted. And it was much cheaper just to look big picture and get a better handle on things. So
Yeah, that's great.
I'm just wondering, Patrick, for some legal advice, please. If we're so fortunate to move forward with this process, could Coastside County water recharge out of our district boundaries, or we would have to only discharge in our boundaries?
Yeah, so I think we should reserve the legal questions for after we kind of do the study and figure out what, what the boundaries are, what we've learned, and then we'll
Okay.
dive deeper into any legal questions that may come up depending on what this board wants to do.
Okay, I just happened to think about that because south of town is very dry. And, if we had surplus recharge water, just thank you for that, Joey.
And your point was, is the coastside view of this is what we're trying to get.
Yes,
We're trying to look at this on a broad basis, from far north to far south, and include all the entities that live within that environment. So we hope this will clarify a lot of that for our public and our other partners.
yeah, because
Yeah,
I
agree
think
with you.
from my perspective, it's not about what we're gonna ultimately do yet.
Yeah.
But
Right.
making sure that we have an
We
understanding
include,
of all the possibilities and, things like legal consideration. I don't think we're
right, that's
really quite there, but I'm interested because having watched or worked on drainage systems, for example, in this area, including on the other side. It's amazing sometimes where groundwater shows up, and you kind of think, well, where did that come from? And suddenly you realize that this coastal range that we have has a pretty tremendous influence, and a lot of it's subsurface, so it's not very clear visual. Gee, did that really come from San Gregorio, or did that really pour down from Miramar? I mean, sometimes all those things are connected. So it'd be nice to understand so we don't over impact anybody either.
right.
Yeah, and it's, where that water goes when you do something with it. I was telling another client of mine this story a couple weeks ago. And she was mentioning that it really kind of hit home. And I started really thinking about that when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And we were playing with I had those little green army men, and we would create a little base and we'd make a little river in my parents' garden and all of that. And we put the hose on it, and man, that water went everywhere but where we wanted it to go. And that has translated into my career that with projects that, it doesn't necessarily going to go where you anticipate it going. And so, it's trying to take a look at that.
James, did you have a comment? Oh, I thought I heard something back there. Excuse me.
All right.
We can bring him back. You ready?
Yes, I'm not going anywhere.
Good job.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Switch to the other presentation. I'll watch the Flips presentation. I'll start. So my half of unless people need stretch break, we good? Keep going. Cookie break. Talk a
Well,
little about,
always time for a cookie break, but why don't we go a few more minutes and then
okay,
if you could move forward with that.
sure. So I was just bringing up, our agenda is talking about the grant funding, summary about where we're at. Alternatives, the big picture alternatives, and then we'll have a little brainstorming session to collect ideas that you guys have been thinking about for a long time. And talk about our next steps for the bigger picture. I'm just gonna keep going. Ah, here we go. We've caught up. The water recycling funding program is administered by the Division of Financial Assistance. And so the district has applied for the grant for the last workshop.
Okay.
And so the program offers planning and construction funding. All right, go ahead and skip a couple slides. Keep going. Here we go. So that's the main part, because you want to be able to pay for what you want to do. Ready for the next one? So the process has several things. So districts has done the grant application. So what we're working now is on the draft project report preparation. And then that is going to be discussed with the water board, ending up with the final project, and then you apply for construction funding if that's the way you want to go. Next slide. So we got 3 main categories of uses, which we'll talk about here in a second. Non-potable reuse, indirect, and direct. I like the next slide. Go ahead. So you got your water source, goes to the water treatment plant, send it to your customers, goes to the wastewater plant, assuming there's no septic tanks. And then the purple pipe, which is conveniently depicted as a purple pipe on the figure, is like, you know, sending it to the golf course or irrigation, things like that. Otherwise, you could treat it further and you could put in a groundwater recharge well, like we were just talking about. You could augment a surface water, you could extreme augmentation. And even more than that, if you went straight from the water advanced wastewater treatment plant, you go to the water treatment plant for direct potable use. So that's the overall summary. Do those make sense? That's the big category. Look at it. I think most of the alternatives I've heard are in one of these categories. So we'll keep going in a little more detail. So go ahead. So non-potable reuse has been explored by the district for a long time. You're not treating it to a level that's potable, but it doesn't need to be because it's being used for irrigation and it's industry standard. You could use your irrigation fill stations. So you need a source of wastewater. You need to find someone that wants to use the water, recycle water, and will buy it from you, which can either be metered use or wholesale use. You have to treat the water to a higher standard than it currently is. And then there's permitting, which is just going to be on every alternative. Because
You left off cost. And that's
cost.
one of the most significant considerations why purple pipe is.
Yes, so we
Yeah.
have a whole matrix analysis that will be presented next time. That was why we started with the grant funding, because cost is the most important thing to see. What we can
Yeah,
afford.
I mean, it doesn't pencil out.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep going, all right. Next slide. Indirect potable reuse, so there's 3 separate categories. We've been looking at the groundwater recharge, reservoir augmentation, and stream augmentation, which go to the next slide. So groundwater recharge is you recharge it and then later extract it from wells. You don't have a saltwater intrusion problem, but it is something that can help with that, like Orange County
Get
does
one.
with that.
They're really popular and it's easy to do.
So again, you need wastewater, you need to treat it, you need a place to inject it, and permitting and cost. Keep going. Reservoir augmentation, so this is where you're pumping to a surface water reservoir, which sounds like you're probably not going to pump it up to Crystal Springs. You don't have another large surface reservoir available.
But a number of ag properties do have some ponds on them
True.
that might be able to negotiate for storage.
Okay, so we have that one in
Kind
the
of
running.
idea of getting up, sending our wastewater to San Francisco, it just thrills me.
All right, keep going.
That's the record.
Probably.
Stream augmentation. You've been exploring this option for a long time. So you want to remove nutrients and you're discharging it to the creek so it doesn't cause an environmental problem with the creek. So again, need the wastewater, treat it, permitting, and cost. I'm getting very repetitive here. So let's go to direct potable reuse, which I think is a goal of the district. So in this, you don't have an environmental buffer. All the other ones, you have some environmental buffer. The groundwater, the street, this time you're going straight to the drinking water. So this needs advanced treatment and has a lot more permitting, and the permitting is just coming out now what the state is going to require for that in California. So it's still draft at the moment. And now I feel so entertained myself because I hear you guys have ideas. So I brought Post-it notes. You get, and we can go post them on our different categories. Am I wrong? People have ideas that they'd like?
Sure, of course.
Oh, gosh, don't get us started.
This is my, because we know we have your deadline coming up, so we're trying to figure out a way that we can, you know, come up with it and also record it.
I have a general question for you.
Okay.
In constructing these types of treatment plants,
Yes.
is it possible to sort of take them in a step by step? So we build a step where we have a water that maybe is used to dampen dust.
You call it designer water and you treat it to level of use because you don't want to over treat it or under treat it. So there's a lot of treatment plants that do treat them to different levels, especially around oil refineries because they need different qualities of water. So that is common.
And are these systems that are in existence now, are they all sort of custom systems, or are people starting to build kind of rack systems?
There are package treatment plants that you can buy. So there's a bunch of new communities being built in Madera County, for example, and they just buy the package treatment plant and then they have no way to discharge their wastewater. And they have a water problem, and that's in their new communities in California. You got to balance the water, so that's how they're doing it. They're treating it to a high level and recycling the water back into the community. And they're like standalone systems, and they're not that big, like half an MGD,
Wow,
gallons per day.
wow.
Yes, you can. The treatment plant that we're going to go look at tomorrow is.
So how about we treat our wastewater, dump it up at 92 at the top of the basin, pump it out at fire.
Am I writing this down? I
No,
can have would you like these
it's kind
scribed?
of written down. We've already written it.
I have all your reports.
Well, then there it is. That's my
So,
idea.
okay. Here, you can be a scribe.
I could write it on here if they
Sure.
don't get up.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. These are the things.
They're in the box.
Okay. But yeah, you have the ones that don't.
Oh,
Yeah. We don't want to decorate your wall. We say they're not bleed through, so.
I know it's a little off our subject, but when we're talking watersheds, and I'm living on it, Pillar Cedars, Denison, Arroyo Leon, just full of trash and log jams and everywhere. How do we convince the state of Fish and Wildlife, if we would clean those, we'd get a better water flow with cleaner water coming past our property? So if we treat water and go through all that effort and try to, recharge back in our watersheds, they're gonna have to be cleaned up because they're just.
Well, that is an excellent barrier to put on that.
It's surface water, John.
Yeah,
So we have to treat the water that comes from the open reservoir the same as we'd have to treat it if we dump it on 92 and pump it out of the ground.
okay.
You have to assume, that the feds want 3 log reduction. We got to do that. If there's hazardous waste, then we got to add another log of reduction. It's pretty formulaic from the feds' point of view.
Thank you.
How far?
I mean, and then I have the
So-
house living in our creek too.
So this is his job to map the groundwater basin, but let's say that everything from the Christmas tree farm drains out to the canyon. And then the question is, and it's pretty much a given that water comes out, right?
Sure.
So then the question is, how far, and what this is gonna come down to is real estate. We're gonna need intake or extraction wells to take it back out, right? And so where can those be located? Can they be located on the west side of Highway 1, or do they have to be on the east side of Highway 1?
You could use my
That's his
property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, this has been great hearing this because as we're sitting here, I'm thinking my initial vision of what we were going to do in the report was we'd have some kind of maybe a couple or some specific locations of where that water would be going, and then we would do that mounding, use that analytical tool for figuring out like a
But the
mounding.
mounding is almost trivial because we've got a sloped drainage basin that we're putting it on. So you throw it on the uphill and I promise you it'll go downhill.
Yeah.
The mounding's not so much a problem here. This isn't a flat aquifer. I'm much more worried about how it's going to disperse and how far, if we drill our well just behind the beach, we may be losing 80% of it. If we put it up by Firewood Farms, are we getting enough detention time? And I think that's where, and then when we drilled wells historically, back around if I remember right, it's on the west side of Highway 1. I remember that the water quality varied a lot. And so we had so my concern is that we got to be careful that we don't get into a mineral deposit that's going to degrade our water quality significantly enough. The further we go west of the treatment plant, the more pipeline we have to buy to put it back to the treatment plant. Pipeline costs a lot of money. So to me, those are sort of the big big questions. And then some of the ones is, I think it's my suspicion that the 92 basin is fairly shallow. And so then it's going to become a very nuanced question about how much impact are we going to have on the agriculture. And if to some extent, I think that impact can be really beneficial. And we build good neighbors through that positive impact. However, if that means that if we're not careful and it is just dumping into the stream and exiting out the stream, then we're not accomplishing what we want. Now it's a stream flow, and the fishes will all campaign against us. So I think it does take some geology in that.
Yeah.
I'm not that excited that basins to the south or the north are going to do us much good, because I think I look at the slant and the incline, and I think they're draining into the ocean, as evidenced by the picture you showed on the wall. So now these are quarter-mile wide aquifers that are all unique, individual, and going straight from the hill into the ocean. So there's nothing, we can't play there. And I just did I shouldn't say. I've done some studies recently locally, and I was appalled at how short the detention time is on the plateaus. The daylight out on those springs that you can see on the bluffs, they're really short, they're really fast, there's no detention, which doesn't speak well of groundwater recharge or reuse. So I don't think we have a lot of options to explore. I don't think that it's completely open. I don't like the legislature, the Pat knows this better, but I think we all worry about, and I think it's legitimate. The State Water Resources Control Board has had some concerns about how little they know about direct potable reuse. And I personally think that we would be premature to spend a lot of time and money on direct potable reuse. That's my opinion, but I think it's being used by communities that are more desperate than we are. And I think this group is trying to look forward to the future, because we think in 20 years, the cost of water and the volume of water is going to be much uglier than it is now. But to try and jump on direct potable reuse, where the state has thrown a yellow flag, the feds fled the room, and so I'm cautious about running down that road. We have water, we're just trying to do it better. So if we take direct potable reuse off the table, we spent a lot of time and money, this group, working on purple pipe projects, and the numbers don't pencil out.
Yeah, the purple pipe is empty so far, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
no ideas that you want, because we can also put ideas in and they immediately exclude them based on
we spent a lot of time working on it, and the problem is that your distribution costs twice as much, and you got to sell the water for less. So how do you spend twice as much for your distribution and sell the product for less money? It doesn't pencil out. So
in our history of wells on the Pillar C, the first production strata of water is about 19 to 23 feet. And then you kind of go dry for a while, and then you hit another sand strata up to 40 feet. And then by 60 feet, there's blue clay. 60 to 90 feet, it's over. So it's very shallow.
Yeah.
But those first flows are high in manganese. Every pipe I have on my farm is like a good looking redhead.
Yeah, and I think you've nailed it. And we have a fairly short, shallow aquifer to work with. It's going to be avoiding contamination, so we don't have it worse. If we're using wastewater, then the volume we're adding is almost exactly equal to what we're needing. So we don't need a huge volume. We get out of the direct reuse scenario. So
Well, a little humor from our property, great grandpa's 100, and leach line was fairly near the wells over the years of history.
Flood twice, we need water.
He was the first recyclers, I think. And, but thank God we have bottled water and CCWD water because, the setback from Pillar Cedars Creek and now is 100 feet, I believe. Is that right, James? About 100 feet setback for well drilling on our watershed.
I'm not sure what.
It used to be 50 feet, but
No, it depends on the classification. You can drill right next to it if Fish and Game doesn't shoot you. But the state will require you to filter and disinfect the water.
okay, but anyway,
Yeah.
we still have well for ag production,
Yeah.
but not for
You know,
consumption anymore. Except for we have a
Bear over
right now
there.
plugged up. Just
I like the colors.
Oh, yeah, that's always the bang of the siren.
When water is treated to be introduced into a stream setting, what kind of treatment level is that? Is that direct potable reuse? Is that indirect potable
The
reuse?
stream, well, depending on the exact application, would still be considered an environmental buffer, so it'd likely be less because you're not going pipe to pipe. So it's still, in theory, the theory behind environmental buffer is the environment might help clean up those unknown contaminants that we don't know yet. Like we keep discovering new things, microplastics, PFAS, things like that.
One of the ideas way back when with Sam was the idea that if we could treat that water to a certain level and then take a like volume from Pillar Cedars Creek, because it's all adjacent, it's all very close, would we be able to draw the creek water, which would be much easier for us to treat and use in our system, and then take the treated water from Sam and replace the stream flow to protect the stream connection to the ocean and also protect the access for the salmonoids to come back into Pillar Cedars Creek. So-
Green water.
So I don't know what category that would be on, but it was a discussion and there were actually, I can't remember the name of the person that wrote the study for us back. I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s, looking at the aquifer around Pillar Cedars Creek. And there were some local people who were kind of monitoring when the golf course was drawing water from their wells and looking at the impact on the stream. And it always seemed to me like maybe there was something that was very proximate, because there was an argument or a discussion that years ago that was actually more of like a bay right there at the connection to the Pacific Ocean. And in fact, there was a lot of discussion about, that had been denigrated over the years. And would it be reasonable to reestablish that as kind of a little bay? And it just seemed like the proximity was good, because the biggest issue I think we have in all of our thinking about water sources is transporting it to and from. This purple pipe discussion is part of the discussion, but it's a long way from Sam up to the Nunes treatment plant. It's a long way from some of these various sources, and that's why the direct potable reuse to me is very attractive because of proximity.
Be careful with the term, because what you're saying is taking an exchange, a like for like exchange. So you're taking stream water and replenishing, but from a regulatory point of view, it's not direct potable reuse. So what you get the best of both worlds in your suggestion, because the State Water Resources Control Board doesn't see it as a wastewater effluent. And if the water is cleaned to better than drinking water without the chlorine, so it's going back into the stream and you have a volume replacement, you avoid the ugly regulatory problem of the direct potable. So your concept is brilliant, but just don't use the direct potable reuse.
Well, but my concept is two, I think, because one of them is working with the stream.
Yeah.
Okay, and in that particular situation, we would still have to take the groundwater and move it to a water treatment plant or build another small plant. And that would be adjacent to SAM. So it's kind of two-pronged. The second prong is to treat it even higher to a direct potable reuse, forget the stream use and plug it into our main line, because the complexity of our district is the length of the main line to service our customers. I mean, that's the issue that we have, just one big long, situation. So having to go up to Newness and back down from Newness is a huge complexity, whereas if we could pop it in right at Highway 1 with a different water treatment plant, I think that gives us some incredible realities that are easy. They're expensive. I mean, the cost hasn't been set every time, and that's what we all worry about.
And we worry about that.
But we don't want to just stop on cost, because as we've all seen, things used to be a lot cheaper in the old days. But they're not going to get a lot cheaper ever again. They're going to keep getting more expensive. And as long as we know that's the reality of our economy, someday it may be very economical to do this.
So I have a question for the group. They don't want to spend a lot of money on piping. Another option would be to create habitat, like wetlands and stuff like that. But I figure that has no benefit really to the district. But you want your water to be used for drinking at some point, right? Versus like creating habitat could be a benefit to you.
Yeah, it's not on our mission statement.
Okay.
I mean, a pond in the Pacific Flyway might be an advantage for the whole community.
No, we did that, Lake Tulare. We're done. We can move on.
Yeah.
We're very proud of it. We'll take full credit.
That flyway is really slowing
I
down.
like it.
Yeah, but they're all moving to the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, the recent article that was in the Daily Journal, and what Mary and I talked about it, about recycled water is, the article is quite lengthy with the state board saying it really is going to require them to go into a reservoir. I don't know if you've seen that. It's in the Daily Journal this last week.
Mhm.
And so a lot of comments from the state in there, amongst all the other things we have to deal with. And it's a lot about Southern California.
Well, how about the idea of building a brewery and
Yeah, okay.
utilizing this water? They've got a local brewery, maybe they need a new location.
Mhm.
And we can provide them the water, and maybe that'll be the incentive for them to utilize it.
We did actually do a non-disclosed client in the valley did want that. They wanted a new source of water, so we looked at that for them. Ended up not going that way, but that is a thing, so.
Yeah, I think those kinds of ideas to me are out there. Maybe they're not the first choice or the most practical, but maybe because we're a small district, it's a number of ideas that end up causing a feasibility to occur, right? And so that's why I think we really want to be at the positive side. I mean, what are the most positive thoughts you have? And, I see a lot of construction water being used, so I think the fill station's a good idea. Spray down the roads, and, I'm in favor of that. And if that's a small step, well, maybe that's a good first small step.
And we'll be looking at whether we have, when we did the study years ago, I want to say it was in the 80s or 90s on the well field. I thought I remember that well field came out a little better than we thought it would be.
It was unreal.
Yeah, so that's, I think, a key thing was we do want to go back and look at that, the potential for that well field. And make sure, because that's frankly cheaper than any of the other alternatives, we don't have to treat water as much. That's going to be, and it's locally grown, which meets the goal. We're looking, hey, 20 years from now, we've been looking at what the cost of our water is. We've been looking at what the availability of our water is, and it's not great. And so it's important to this board to do the research, and we understand that it takes time to get the permitting and the process in play. And so we want to look at what our options are, and we want to do it smart. And so that's kind of our goal. But some of the ones are pretty obvious that, we studied purple pipe, which seemed like a really good idea.
Wasn't one of our long-term strategic plans was the well
Yeah,
research on new well.
yeah,
I mean, to me, that's always been on the table.
yeah.
That's very important too. I
Yeah.
asking.
And that meets
That's-
Ken's goal.
that's
of
exactly
plugging
where
into
my
the
head
pipeline.
was.
Yeah,
Right, no,
Yeah.
I'm still thinking that's a key.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the information we'll get from this.
So is that groundwater
Will
recharge?
give us some
no,
insight
it's
into the
groundwater
reality
extraction.
of that. I mean,
Okay, well, that's not part of our
that's what,
That's this other study you're working on.
other study.
yeah, I know,
That's
I
what-
just thinking out loud, I'm trying to.
I think he's thinking
I
out
mean,
loud where
everything I'm
money
hearing-
could be better spent.
Everything I'm hearing seems to always result in the need for SAM wastewater, which has always been an interesting opportunity. And so I think we need to see how we can apply any of this technology to using that in some other easier way than only having one customer, which has always been the Gulf Coast. If there's any way to make it easier for that to become a source for other delivery and then use later, that's important.
Yeah.
Because that might make it a lot easier to solve this issue without pipes, which is the whole problem that we've always faced. It's very expensive to find delivery mechanisms that don't cost millions of dollars per month. If this can give us that in some form, other options for that, and maybe it makes it a lot more saleable. to the players involved.
Along that line, North Wavecrest down there, there's a movement to put that back in agricultural production.
Wow.
And that has no water down there because they used to get it out of Carissima Creek with Casanelli Dam, but that's all off. But that's on the path to the golf course, and that is the underserved community pushing for that farm. So that might be other resources to come in for funding
Well, isn't,
from the state.
and isn't there the discussion now potentially having Bay City properties become housing, right? So there's,
Kind of getting off the table with the county right now, I think.
but if that's,
Agriculture is kind of not a supporting of a farmer's market there.
oh, I see.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
But that's certainly a potential need for quite an abundance of water. And, you know, suddenly the piping becomes a little bit more affordable because, maybe there are 3 or 4 customers, major customers. I don't know how many housing units it would end up being, but that's a large property, Bay City Flowers.
Well, they're gonna put, they'll be building homes there.
Well, I think that's kind of a second guess it right now. But along Pillar Cedars, they want to put 40 manufactured homes over there on city property. I believe 40.
Wow.
That's another issue.
Well,
Yeah.
the need for water will never cease.
Yeah,
That's what that says.
that's a
And
good.
having the water available is what's all about. That's what we're talking about here. And it seems to me that if Sam is always in the play, we've got to find ways to make it cheaper to get that stuff used in some other fashion that maybe we planned on in the past, which was always a restriction.
Just
So you have that money.
a personal experience for this well world. The well at Cabrillo Highway Pumpkin Farm that we had for 60 years. That well has to be 75 years in the ground there. It was sleeved one time because it was collapsing the old iron casing, and never a new well drilled there. But that thing is, over our years, we're not there any longer, but it was 30, 35 gallons a minute for all those years. And every morning when I turn on the well, I'm like, thank God this thing is still pumping. But that's right down, 100 yards from the sand plant.
Yeah.
And right on the Pillar Sequence there. So that wouldn't be a bad area for a well field. For the future. We don't own that land, but there's different property owners.
And that's what a lot of what this is. If we're gonna have to buy real estate, it takes us time and money to do it. So we want to know. And far better to have the the luxury of planning ahead rather than being slammed with, hey, you gotta cut your water use by 40% because we're oversubscribed. And we have a benevolent overlord who gives us 80% of our water. And that puts us in a compromised position.
Oh, very good. We have about another 25 minutes to continue to move on.
I think we're doing pretty good.
Okay, you're
So-
happy with some of our
We got
response?
stuff on there. So,
Well, you gotta realize it's the 8/8 day today, so we're a little more gentle if we hit the ticket tonight or tomorrow night, then we won't have to worry about finding. But give my wife the first chance, please.
Buy lottery tickets.
Yeah, it's a 8/8 day. You gotta go with the 8. Put a lot of
Nobody will
8s
win
on your
tonight.
card.
catching up to you.
Okay.
I think that's, maybe using the water for a gambling casino. I'm not.
I mean, you don't have any big,
Exactly.
big developers coming to town, right? They're,
We're pretty growth limited.
Yeah.
But we have one water vendor who sells us our water. And
Yeah.
we
But
don't-
now what's happened in all of our no growth life that we've lived as a city and also at CCWD, that momentum is just being build now. And the state is coming from the governor's office too, and legislature. All these coastal commissions and all these guys have been doing a great job for all these years. All of a sudden, it's in a fluff out there.
Yeah.
Because the infrastructure is not in place, I always argue. Try to get on 92 on a sunny day, right? Or get down Main Street today.
Well, Cindy, in your opinion, where do you think the
the answer.
laws are gonna fall in terms of direct potable reuse? Is it gonna, it's getting stirred up. It's definitely not jumping on a bandwagon. So do you think it's going to be something that'll be worked out based on technology? Will it be worked out based on?
Politics, you don't know that.
Okay,
Where's
politics,
guns and money?
but ultimately in the political world, do you think that direct potable reuse will prevail? And is that a 10-year horizon or a 20-year horizon or 50-year horizon? Because it's inevitable that we will run out of water. I mean, that's not a question,
Yeah, there's a large lobbying force right now with California water reuse trying to push them through. And they're pretty organized and they have their people in Washington DC helping push things through. So
I think right here too, excuse me, the Pure Water of Southern California has got 80 million from the state already.
Yeah.
And that's all in this article here. It's kind of packed up.
yes, it goes back to the state putting money where
Yeah.
they want to go. They're funding these recycled water studies. I don't know how long the time horizon is. Definitely not 10 years. I think it's gonna be longer than that. Other states are doing it. I think California will eventually get there. So,
and so I think that that's when we're thinking about these issues like direct potable reuse. It might be interesting to try to produce a little bit of a timeline.
that's a
Yeah.
continuum for this project, because it's like, what can we do today versus what can you do in the future? Like, do you want to start investing, taking the steps now to go that way, or is it just not a good idea?
Well, Governor Newsom is calling for an increased recycled water use by 9% by 2030. We just hope we're still alive by then, and doubling that by 2040.
Yeah,
That's print from Sacramento.
we're gonna be pretty long in tooth by then. That's a fact.
So tell us some good news about the grants. You had a little arrow saying they'd been submitted. So how soon do we get the money and how much?
I'm not over to you.
Now, basically, we're starting with a feasibility grant application. The person I'm working with at the state actually has been on vacation, so I think she's back this week, so I may have more information. But they will, I think that will likely take, to know if we can get the study covered, 50% of the study covered.
Okay, that's good
Probably.
news.
Yeah,
What
probably in the next 2.
What type of projects is the state excited to fund?
Well, what they're, I mean, first of all, what they're doing with this feasibility study is the idea is that we come up with a project. So, the end results
This is
needs to be a project. So.
Right, but there's some that they're excited about and some they're not, and I would,
It's the ones that give the
In
most
the
public
past.
benefit.
Yeah,
in the past, direct potable reuse has not been one they've been excited about.
That's why it's a continuum. So if we can come up with something that helps satisfy the grant, because we want to maximize the amount of grant money you can get.
Yeah.
And then maybe you pursue other things in the future.
I know,
Okay.
it seems to me again that this direct potable use horizon is pretty far out.
I actually
mean-
think it's a lot closer than it used to be.
Yeah, but not for, I think recycling is much more in our time window than direct potable reuse. You can't get to there without getting to here first.
But
And the
they,
guys that are doing this stuff, as I read the article that Glenn was kind enough to forward, we're in the $1.5 billion, $2 billion funding ranges. And, it just boggles my mind. I
We
mean, no
could
matter
spend
what
that
the Feldman factor says, we're never gonna have money. We'd spend that money in a whisper if we got it. I mean, but there's no way. I mean, let's be realistic. The kinds of people that are doing this and that are working it are the people that service millions of
Metropolitan.
customers, the metropolitan water districts. I'm trying to focus on the right syllable. And that is that what do we have to do to get to some of the wastewater that we have in the community used for some purpose where we'll replenish something and allow us to use our water that we can for potable use. And I just gotta see that be the key, one of the key things we've got to deal with, the direct stuff. I'd love to do that too, but I just think that's outside the horizon, at least my brain's working in right now.
so
I'm not just.
the next question on grants is that should we be applying for money to rebuild the wastewater treatment plant at the same time?
Our study is only looking at the feasibility study, so you wanna, at the district.
Well, look, if we're having this much trouble getting a grant to do feasibility study, because nobody's here to work with us, then what are we gonna do when we want real money?
well,
Where are we gonna go to ask somebody to consider what we want, and if we can't get any response on what it seems to be a reasonably modest request?
I am.
They don't seem to be geared up for this stuff. I'm surprised. We've been talking about this for 3 months.
Well,
I'm sorry.
yeah, well, part of it was, we redid part of the application. And in terms of, I've been talking to the person at the state and, she seemed optimistic about it. So we'll see. I mean, I say she,
As long as you're-
and the end goal is they want to do these grants and they want the communities to be looking at opportunities. So, and she actually, she said that this is great because there hasn't been a lot of focus on the coastside. So they would like to see it.
Well-
So, we'll all these things are slow. The end result, what they want is a project at the end, though, in this feasibility study. So, and that could be that could be a fill station. And part of this is looking at, do you start off with baby steps to get to the longer term vision? So it's, so that's, and
Yeah, but let's be
Figure out how can
careful.
we
I mean,
afford it.
if we're giving waterworks $200,000 to design a $50,000 water fill station, that's not a good return on
It's 300
investment.
now.
Water fill stations are cheap.
Well, I think as you mentioned, Mary,
Doesn't seem like
if you look at the little bit of fluff going on with discharge of San Francisco into the watershed, the ocean. So you got San Francisco, Daly City's treating, I believe, Pacifica is doing some treating. And then it's coming to Half Moon Bay, that coast, and it's not gonna be any more until you get to the Santa Cruz County line. And so they better look at us as coastal, as you mentioned there briefly. In the grant world, this is where you want to protect the Fairlawn and the Monterey Bay Sanctuary, folks, because these discharges are going to come to an end soon.
Yeah.
Those pipes out in the watershed, and if you look back in history with the Fairlawn discharge out there, that happened to just go around their discharge pipes. Thank you, Willie Brown, for that one. Because Sam is discharging.
Project definition that they're basing the grant on. What was given to us by these folks for their project?
It's,
Isn't it there? Don't they have it?
we have, yeah, they have it. We're working, they have the application.
Right.
So, I
That's
can't give
sort
you
of
a timetable
the table.
because the person's on vacation.
It's on the table.
Yeah, it's
We've
on,
already given it to them.
it's
Now
on
we're
the-
just waiting for their assessment and their,
but the first round, because we had given them, a proposal back, a number of months ago, and they were, fine with it. It's actually, it's a very, cookie cutter approach.
I can hold my breath.
Well, it's along with.
But the next step after that, after we got that grant,
As I said,
And we
last
do our
meeting,
project.
we're starting with that pony, but we got to get to the.
but they would then
clientele.
define the next phase of this project, which would be for real money.
Yes, so
okay,
basically the
fine.
idea is that they want to see a project at the end of this that they can
Right,
fund, we can go to construction.
right.
So, I mean, if we could find something in the indirect potable reuse column, that would be,
Right.
if they're. Yeah, but we can see what, what Waterworks recommend, so.
I don't know the answer yet.
I think one thing that strikes me, and Glenn was involved in a lot of this, and Mary was involved. We had a number of meetings with Sam. And Sam has water. We happen to have four of the most poisoned beaches in California, all right? And we can tell, and we know that part of that has to come from the discharge, right? So there's a water source. It's being discharged and it's causing environmental damage. We're not the, environmental protectors of the coast, but we do have some responsibility because the water that we sell to people goes through their process and wants into the ocean. That's still us. You look at the water system, it's a system. You can't invent water. So all you can do is protect the quality of it. And so we have, in my estimation, a responsibility to make sure that the entire process is as good as it can be. And if there's some way for us to capitalize enough to help pay to process water in whatever way we decide to do it, and I personally think replacing the fresh water with the water that we treat is a really viable option and a wonderful option. Because we do two things. We utilize something that's a problem. We also may find beneficial uses, and the beneficial use to me, if it's only environmental, is enough. I'm fine with that. Can we afford it? Well, we don't know. We don't know what that's really going to look like, and we don't want to limit it. But the last thing we want to do is be at the tail end of the process, because it's not a process that's going to go away. It has to be perfected and improved and experimented with. And so I just think it's exciting to hear the options, to talk to professionals, to quit BSing around about it, because I don't know enough. I don't know enough hydrogeology to make, a quality decision. I haven't seen enough water treatment in my life to know really what it's going to take or what it looks like, or, any of these kinds of things. So I want to be educated about it. I think our customers want to be educated about it, so that we have some good, reasonable science to say, yeah, that's really worth looking at. And so I'm excited. I don't know what the best options are. I'm hoping you guys do. That's why you're sitting in the room. And that's why I'm voting to spend money with you guys, because I'm happy to give you my crazy ideas or blah, blah, blah. But I'm hoping you guys are so clever and so informed and so involved that you're going to come back and go, wow, we never even thought about this option. But gosh, what we really think we ought to do is turn some of this vacant land around here into a big lake or a big pond. And it's going to create recreational activities, and it's going to replenish the water, and it's going to make the birds come back. And it's going to, do these wonderful things. And that sounds pretty pie in the sky. I don't know what the.
To put it lightly.
I don't know what the price tag is on it, but I don't want to discount it. And so that's my strong feeling. And we knew from the beginning that feasibility and the opportunity to get money, we heard him talk about that at SAM. Oh, let's just get together and write a grant. I'm not gonna write a grant to the state of California. So I'm hoping you do. Because if you do and you're successful and we're successful, we're gonna start down a great path.
Well,
And it's
I think
it's a
along that
wonderful
line that he's going with, if you look at it from agricultural perspective and global warming, I just got word recently, the last day or two, regarding all the horse people at Stanford and Palo Alto and Portola Valley. The hot weather's been really hurting and they're being displaced off of their properties now because of more building and construction in Palo Alto and all that. But part of this potential treated water, people are looking for horse properties and reservoirs for dust control of their riding arenas. That could be a potential customer for the Coastside because that's coming. People are looking to move their valley horses to our beautiful coast. And that's something you would never think of. But now, the ponies are wanting to get over here to cool off in the future.
I'm still waiting with bated breath. I'm not sure how many more meetings I'm gonna have to wait. I really want to hear a cost. That was my question when when I zoomed in a month ago. Cost. Why is no one sharing cost with us? I asked specifically for Sharon Heights, how much did it cost? How much did it cost to construct it? What are the energy costs to run that plant? PG&E is going to be spending $20 billion undergrounding their utilities. Who's going to pay for that? PG&E customers. Look at our budget. PG&E is a huge component of our budget. How much does it cost to run these plants and how much does it cost to build that plant? And when is someone going to share that number with me? And not only me, but our customers.
Okay, that's a fair guess for us, the professionals to dig through. Because, it's like buying a new tractor. You want to buy one, but can you afford it? So we have to make sure we want to afford this project.
Yeah, it passes part of this analysis that we're moving forward with our alternatives that are being.
I assume you'll have those numbers and the information you provide when you give us your project plan, et cetera, and your recommendation.
Yes.
I mean, it's gonna come. It's just a question of, you came here to get from us what we think.
This is the preliminary workshop. Last time was introduction. This is a gathering ideas because we want to make sure we
I
understand.
think Kevin forgot to tell you that we all voted for you to do this. I know nobody here is hostile. And
It's all when you have the,
getting on with it and
Yeah.
making it happen and giving us some information and telling us things we don't know and things that will make our ears perk up and that will say, oh, we never even really understood that. So that's where we're going with this. We need to have some of that. And so we can taste it and see it and smell it and feel it. Basically,
and the
that's
best part of it, they're posting here. These are not boards where they have the erasers. They can erase what we've said.
True.
You got to take it home.
Good thing we didn't use the Post-it notes. I have to take them off.
So I think we're moving forward here. We got about another 15, 20 minutes. So any other discussion you'd
what
like
is
to
the
share
timing
with
for,
us?
again, I lost track of that. It wasn't up to
Okay, 11 o'clock.
Oh, for the-
schedule
Yep.
for your
Yep.
deliverables. Do you have any picture of that again? We saw it, I think.
September.
September.
That's where we're gonna get our stuff over to
For
Waterworks.
them.
Yeah.
When is Waterworks?
They need another 24 hours to write it up. Later.
Oh,
when will
Numbers
Waterworks
on,
provide us?
no pressure.
I'm just trying to get an idea of the project. So we know what we can.
Yes, the next workshop would be presenting the alternative when they lined up. So probably October.
Okay. well, the
Pumpkin
October time.
Festival.
Huh?
Pumpkin Festival.
You're like the completion date in January,
Yeah.
February,
Yeah.
Oh, they're
We are
gonna give us some
but in between.
previews in October.
Updates, yeah.
trying to move faster than our schedule that we
Yeah,
have.
yeah, well, you can see we're very relaxed here. We don't have any real demands. So, no, we've organized for 32 years. And so we just think of maybe we want to see if we can close on it at some point and get some numbers for Chris. Yeah,
Chris wants his name.
I know, I do too. I heard some numbers for Sharon Heights and made my hair stand up.
Yeah,
Yeah, really. The little number I heard so far was, well, we're gonna see it tomorrow, so it'll be interesting to see what you get. Numbers like,
It's a nice plan
When's our next meeting?
for this.
Yeah,
Hasn't been scheduled yet.
I've got a calendar. I'll help you with that.
Excellent.
We're
It
also.
sounds like September we'll have data from you, right? James.
Something I'd like to know about in terms of stream augmentation, I don't know the answer to this, is what level of treatment will we have to? We're talking advanced treatment probably. What are the temperature limitations gonna be? Because I know it's a big one for stream augmentation.
you
And
know who would have those answers is Pacifica, because they did Calera Creek. I did tour that soon after construction.
temperature is a tough one.
Yeah, and so they're doing it, I mean, and it came up here for environmental,
Right.
do goodness, I guess.
And that'd actually be interesting to compare because we put it in Pillar C in on 92, then you get the natural temperature mitigation. Whereas we do the stream augmentation, we've got to control the temperature.
And the other question would be, what concerns are there gonna be raised about it being an established steelhead habitat? So those are three questions that come up for me for the stream augmentation.
Did you ever see the water treatment plant that Scott Holmes designed or helped
Yeah,
design?
that was
build?
Calera Creek, yeah.
Yeah, Clara Creek. Have
I've
you
been
seen it?
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Pretty amazing.
Very nice birding habitat.
The restoration was unreal.
Yeah.
The stream that they built, the meandering stream, and it came back in like 2 years. It was pretty phenomenal project. Yeah, pretty amazing.
They did have, when I was on the regional board, I think a big odor issue at one point there too. They were fined $1 million at one point.
Got put in.
Well, pretty good now.
Many years ago.
I thought the plant jasmine and Alliant.
There are some very fragrant plants on that trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
That can open up some other grant opportunities beyond what you would normally get for an infrastructure project as well, like from the Wildlife Conservation Board, who at least on some of their programs have more money than people are asking for in grants. So
I think that's what's exciting. You know, it's hard because it gets sort of global. And, you know, we have to be practical at some point. I mean, we know that. But I don't think that at this stage of our interaction with you, we have to limit ourselves in our thinking. I don't think it's limiting.
Not yet.
I think limiting time will come. And, you know, we'll slash and burn everything around. But for now, I think we get to think outside the box and maybe something really terrific.
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these issues that are being pushed on us by state legislature now regarding both. You know, and these cities are gonna be forced to look to support water districts and water boards on the future of water planning from my perspective, infrastructure, because they can't just keep pushing these things down all communities, on coastal communities. And look what's going on in the peninsula on El Camino Real, going to San Carlos, San Mateo, Redwood City. Build.
Well, hopefully not come to that here.
Well, I
It's not
agree.
it's just not in cost for that.
Yeah. But
I mean, people may want to do it.
Yeah, we don't have the transportation.
Yeah.
Huh?
That's all.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, we don't have the
Yeah,
transportation.
that's not it.
It's not our.
All right, Mr. President, you done?
yeah, I got another 10 minutes. If any other comments from the staff would like to make, Mary, are you comfortable?
We're only 30-40%
Moving forward, staff, or you have anything you'd like to add to us here?
So we're trying, so tomorrow we're gonna see Sharon Heights. And then we were trying to get a tour of Monterey, so James is gonna work on that. So, and then there's also opportunities to arrange for tours of the Silicon Valley plant in, and there I
You
can.
mean the San Jose,
Valley water.
Santa Clara?
Valley water.
The one on Banker Road.
Yeah.
And so they do tours that we can sign you up for. They do maybe 3 times a month.
They do a lot virtual or in person, so it'd be easy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, and yeah, there's
Not big.
virtual too, so, but the in
I mean-
person.
Water eventually.
No, I think it's good.
And then Aqua's gonna do
In terms of
Alameda
scale.
County, right?
Scale, I mean, you know,
September.
the scale of those guys is, that one particular, I mean, Sharon Heights at least is attainable.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's like a thing I can get around my head around. Something like Valley Water is gonna be humongous. It's like going to visit the head
It's actually
kitchen.
not as big as you'd think it
It
is.
isn't?
It's just the pilot.
Huh?
It's just the pilot trying to
Yeah.
tell about it.
What does that
Yeah, it's
cost?
not-
It's a demonstration.
What does that cost?
I do not know the cost.
I mean, when you take pilots like 150 mil, 200 mil, tell me. Give me a guess.
A lot more than that.
It's not big.
Oh, it's only a pilot?
It's only a demonstration plant. Yeah.
Yeah, I
it's trying to
remember
keep
like
But how many people will
$50
it
million
serve?
or something like.
It's not even that. They're
It's not even.
they're planning on going into the ground with it. They're not planning like
Yeah,
they're. Everybody but Mountain View is joining together to stop
do-
purple pipe and go into the ground.
yeah,
Okay, I know, I didn't realize just,
Pipe.
yeah.
they're not building. What about Monterey? How big are they?
Monterey one,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know what their capacity or advanced treated facility is, but their flows average between 10 and 30 million gallons per day. 10 and 30
10
mg.
to 30.
and will it run to, how much did it cost?
I think phase 1 was 80 million, but I don't know. I need to reach out to my friends over there.
So, okay,
If you have dates of when you want to go, Mary can let me know and I'll set it up.
Martinez is spending 200 million, I think, on.
Martinez?
Yeah, on,
200 million?
on their plant, 200 million.
I mean, Valley Water, you know, if they ever go real, it's gonna cost a few pennies for that. The ones in Southern California are $1 billion, some of them.
Yeah. it's
So
unbelievable.
these are relatively large. Okay, I gotta get something to get my hands around. That says, hey, you might be able to do something like this if we figured out some clever ways.
I think when you hear the Sharon Heights number, you'll pass out.
Was it 40 million?
I would
Well, let's
think
get there tomorrow and
20
then.
and 40.
What kind of plant is that? I'm sorry again. Indirect.
It's a golf, they're using it for purple pipe for a golf course and help, Caltrans.
And how many people are in it?
Everybody on.
Nobody.
Yeah, nobody.
Oh, it's for the golf course.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Again, from my
And
perspective.
eventually maybe slack linear accelerator might take a while.
Yeah.
But Waterworks, they did.
I'm sorry?
Waterworks did the design, it was
All right.
a design build, and they were the designer of Sharon Heights.
Yeah, no, I
I
understand.
did the permitting.
And then, Patrick, we have you here, so I may ask you just a brief explanation about tomorrow, just for the two of us to be this, plant
Oh,
tomorrow.
if it's just 2 of you, you're
There's
good.
two of us, no
Yeah.
problem.
Okay, no, I.
Not a majority of the board.
Sounds like great. I wanted my fellow board members to understand, we would love to have them too, but this is, what we have to do tomorrow is just,
Otherwise, the Brown Act issue.
I
Yeah.
was told that we were all driving in Patrick's car and his legal representation was all legal.
Correct. There will maybe 2 of you going. Your legal counsel will not be driving. And we do want to comply with Brown. And the reason is it's the Brown Act has a
I know
majority of
that,
you
but-
all getting together
public doesn't.
to talk about something that's related to district business. And there's some specific exemptions. So if it was an Aqua sponsored tour,
Right.
then it would be covered by one of the exemptions as an example. But this is just going down, looking at it, and you're clearly going to be talking about district business. And that's why only 2 of you can go. So there's
Thank
not a
you.
majority.
Only
Are they
the,
allowed to videotape while they're there?
only the special.
You'll have to ask Sharon Heights whether
Oh,
they're allowed to videotape.
yeah.
Oh, you
Because
can't.
it's not a public forum.
Okay, but
It's a private golf course.
if one of the board members were to videotape and provide that two other board members, or we're back on the Brown Act.
You would have a serial
A
meeting.
serial meeting, I was just gonna
And so
say.
you could not do that. You would have to do it in a public.
Please don't
In a
videotape.
public forum.
The video serial. meeting.
Since you asked, you open the door. for me to actually
This
advise
time,
the
I
council.
think, we'd like to thank, all of you for attending.
Thank you very much.
And we'll take a 10 to 15-minute break. And I think, we can restock one, water jug up here. If we could, thank you, staff, and,